Hello and welcome. My name is John Gulzari. So today I'd like to talk about case for Hazaragi as separate language. Who this is for and not for. So this presentation is for people who are academically sound, who are scholarly, people with the open mind, people with the growth mindset, someone who analyzes information, someone who is willing to hear all the opinion before making their minds. Who this is not for? People who are negative and pessimistic, nasty who argue for sake of argument, people with fixed mindset, people who doesn't listen to others, narcissistic personality, abusive personality, egoistic or racist. So they don't like to listen to opposite view. And today I'd like to share my view on why Hazaragi is a separate language. Why you listen to me? Why this? Why now? So I am native Hazaragi speaker. I am master degree holder. I am co-founder of a research platform known as Hazaragi. I study and research for a long time, especially on the language and culture and history. I'm author of a book called Hazara Embroidery. I'm also founder of Matchit Incorporation, and I am currently holding a president position there. I have decade of community development experience. I am lifelong learner and thinker. What about others, these so-called experts on the language? For your kind information, there is no one who is currently holding a PhD on Hazaragi language globally. There is no doctorate thesis on Hazaragi language. There is no academic, but all these so-called experts, they are a general talker, which they just bluff. And so-called these language experts, they are educated in Persian language, and many of them doesn't hold credible authority on language. Also, the so-called linguistic are generalist other than a specialist on Hazaragi language. So they're just guesswork. There is no body of research, a body of work which has been conducted on the language. So therefore, we need to discount their expertise on this. So some of these critiques, they have several objections on Hazaragi being a language. So there is number one, no alphabet. Number two, there is no books in the language. Number three, there is no dictionary. Number four, there is no grammar. Number five, there is no media like radio, TV, etc. Number six, there is no video. Number seven, it is not ancient language. I'd like to overrule these objections by number one, providing that Hazaragi have 6 alphabets so far, and Hazaragi have 10 dictionaries so far. Hazaragi have grammar. Hazaragi have several books in Hazaragi language. Hazaragi have several videos, animation, stage dramas, etc. on Hazaragi language. Hazaragi have also radio and TV channels. What is a language? What is a dialect? And what is an accent? A language, a system of conversational spoken, manual, in brackets sign, or written symbols by means of which human beings, as a member of social group or particular participants in its culture, expresses themselves. So in a sense, when people making conversations are expressing themselves using tone, pitch, body language, and sound, this all comes together as a language which someone expresses themselves in a social settings. So what's dialect? Dialect is a particular form of language which is peculiar to a specific region or social group. So for example, if there is Kalt group, that's a dialect. And Hazaragi is far from it because I'll tell you later on. Accent, a distinctive way of pronunciations, pronouncing a language, especially one associated with a particular country, area, or social class. So language, dialect, and accent. You can see a chart here which is the old world language families, which comes together at 27 families. At the moment there are two branches of language. So it's Indo-European, which goes there, which is including English, German, Spanish, Romanian, Russians, and also other European languages. This all comes under Indo-European language. And there's another branch of languages which is like Farsi, Pashto, Persian, Kurdish, Balochi, and so on, and Hazaragi as well. They put it here. So this is, and they are under the Indo-Iranian language. And there is another branch of language which called Indo-Aryan language. Under this is Hindi, Urdu, Marathi, Bengali, Singhali, and so on. This all comes under Indo-Aryan languages. So how linguistics divided this branch of language? In this, your guess is as good as mine. For example, number one, if they have divided these languages by geographical locations, so Hazaragi is placed under Persian language with Pashto and so on, which they are totally different languages. And for example, the language of Pakistan, which is Urdu, which is put under Aryan language. First of all, they are not Aryans in Aryan race, and secondly, they are very close to Hazaras in Afghanistan because they have border with Afghanistan. So therefore, it is wrong rather than if it's divided by region. So the Urdu has been put away rather than putting together with the Indo-Iranian languages. Second thing is, if it's racial distribution, Hazaras only share 2% to 4% of DNAs with Iranian or Persian people. So therefore, again, it is wrong if the Hazaragi is placed under Persian language. Third thing is, if it's divided on the grammatical structure, it's again wrong because so far as we know, and I've been researching for past 10 to 20 years, there is no such a credible book which says that Hazaragi is part of the Persian language and Hazaragi shares the grammatical structure. So this is wrong again. Fourth, I have an objection on this old language family chart because what is missing from this chart is that Mongolic language, Turkic language, Chinese, Arabic are missing from this chart. You can do a close observation and I'm sure that you won't be able to find these languages here. So if not these elements above 1 to 4, where Hazaras were put under Persian language, so I'll question that. Language format, as we know, there's spoken language, written language, sign and body language. Under spoken language, so Australian Aboriginals, some African languages, Hazaragi, some Asian languages, they come as form of spoken language. Like English, Persian, French, and some European languages, they come under written language. Sign language, sign and body language, World Sign Language, Auslan, Australian Sign Language, body language, non-verbal communication such as body language, so artificial language, they all come under sign and body language. So what if Hazaragi is separated from Persian? I mean, the sky is not going to fall. Academically, we will be disadvantaged because Persian has like 10 to 20 years history. Hazaragi will be also disadvantaged because it's distance from our history. Not really, but some people think so. Other will mock up and make a joke of the language because it is new and it's taking its baby infancy and baby steps. Lost past works written in Persian. As far as I know, there is not such a Hazaras been written chronicles which are in Persian. There are some, but they are from Iranian descent, so therefore they are not relevant to Hazaras. In support of Hazaragi is separate language from Persian is we can initiate working on our own language, enriching vocabulary of Hazaragi, improving grammar, creating poems, creating rules, publishing literature in Hazaragi, working with media and broadcasting some of literatures. Why you think Hazaragi is a language? Well, there are several arguments. So I have 5 arguments here, which is not conclusive list. So there are 10 million Hazaras worldwide which they speak Hazaragi. As some of the experts which they have put in literature, 60% of 7,000 languages currently spoken worldwide are under 10,000 populations. So 10,000 people speak 60% of the population, world population, is they are under 10,000 people. And Hazaras are 10 million people worldwide in 5 continents. Secondly, language is understood by others regardless of geographical location or distance. For example, if someone is living in Afghanistan, a Hazara living in Afghanistan, and Hazara born in USA, when they interact with each other, when they speak in Hazaragi, both of them will understand. So it is a language with its own accent because it's spoken regardless of geographical location or distance. Some experts, they argue that if a person is speaking, have 3,000 words, which makes functional language, Hazaragi is, we have the storage of 25,000 words. So far is compiled in many dictionaries that I can show you later on. Language has several other dialects and accents. For example, Besudi, Daizingi, Jaguri, Kabuli, Koitagi, Yakaulangi, Sunni Hazaras accent, etc. Hazaragi is comprehensive language, like Shahid Hussain Ali Yazifi, this guy here, who said that Hazaragi has grammar, tenses, vowels, dictionary. Hazaragi has couplets, quadruplets, song, set song. Hazaragi has makta. Hazaragi has a kind of yielding, daidu, bulbi. Hazaragi have many of its own elements which comes together as a language. So that's why I think Hazaragi is a language, because it's comprehensive and conclusive on its own right, rather than being part of any other language. Why do you think Hazaragi is not Persian? Because most Hazaragi vocabularies cannot be understood by Persian speaker. So therefore, if a Hazara person is speaking Hazaragi, most Persian speakers does not understand a word of it. So how can that be same language and many people don't understand the language? Number 2, Hazaragi's sound and grammatical structure are different. Many words, many things, this Tailo, Bulo, Mateo, Jamcheo, these all words there, when they're spoken, many of the Persian speakers, they cannot understand it. Point number 3, Hazaragi has double-digit Mongolian words in it, double-digit Turkish words in it, double-digit Arabic words, single-digit Pashto words, single-digit Urdu words, single-digit Sanskrit, single-digit English words that comprises of Hazaragi language. So there is not much left which can become Persian language. So if over 70-80% of Hazaragi is mixture of all these languages like Turco-Mongolian languages, nothing is left to become a part of Persian language or become variant of Persian language. If it has 70-80% of all these elements here, we cannot say that it's part of the Persian language or variant of Persian language. Point number 4, Hazaragi stories, folklores, lullaby, yielding, music are completely different than Persian. When it's spoken like this, bulbuli gasba tardu datamahai, this cannot be understood by Persian speakers. some of the wordings, they are totally different. So if the Persian speakers cannot understand all these words, lullabies, folk tales, folk songs and musics, how they can be the same language? These are some of the elements that makes Hazaragi different from being Persian, because the tones and pitch, tenses, verbs, idioms, stories, folk music such as Daidu and Duadai, poems, vocabularies, lullabies, and set songs such as Mercy and Nauha, and sentence structures. Is Hazaragi an endangered language? There are approximately 7,117 languages currently spoken all over the world. So the answer would be no. Reason being, because the population of Hazara is 10 million worldwide, and it is still growing and is in evolutionary period before it becoming fully mature language. 90% of the languages are spoken fewer than 10,000 people. So most of these languages will be extinct by 2100. 90% of the languages are spoken by 10,000 population or lesser. So it means if the population of a language is like 1,000 or 500 or 100 families, that will be extinct. But in this case, that Hazaras have 10 million population worldwide, I don't think this is an endangered language and is going to be extinct. Someone may ask why language is become endangered, because an endangered language is one that's likely to become extinct in near future, because many languages are falling out of use. So many people, when they don't use it, or maybe I think they are replaced by other language, such as in Hazaragi's case, if it's been replaced by Persian language or any other language, it will become extinct. So therefore, we should mind our own language and we work on our language. Are new languages being born and replace the old languages that dies? Yes, of course. Many languages, including American Sign Language, have been born within the last few centuries. Like say in this map, you can see this map which has been provided from USA, showing that Hazaragi language existed in USA. How or why languages lost? There are a few underlying reasons which I listed here. Is influenced by influencing by dominant language or culture, influenced by threats by theaters, cinemas, and media of other culture, by official language of the region and the governments change, so people are forced to speak another language. Social, economical, and political forces does put an impact on a language. Voluntary give up, such as many Hazaras and many Hazara intellectuals. Large majority of them, they are against Hazaragi being a separate language. They're thinking that the sky is going to be fallen, so therefore they don't accept Hazaragi being as a language, despite knowing that Hazaragi has potentials and have everything in it to be a language. Or by domination, discrimination, and propaganda of opponents. So like many other parties and political issues, that they try to dominate other language. State use proxies, for example, religious missionaries. In this case, use the missionaries from some other countries to dominate Hazaragi language. How or why to preserve a language? Preserving a language is quite crucial. So working toward preservation and protections of one's own language, literature production in the language, further research on the language, lobbying to get the language recognized in country where they're living, educating others on the language, or becoming volunteers and educating others, oral storytelling, so the future generations, when they hear these stories in their particular language, for in this case Hazaragi, or poetry nights where language is being put on a show, book publishing and reviews in the language, language exchange with others, teaching for future generations about the language. Concluding arguments, Hazaragi can be understood regardless of geographical locations. Hazaragi have tenses, present, past, future, tense, and so on. Hazaragi has many accents such as Besudi, Jagori, Ghazini, Daizengi, Kabuli, and so on. Hazaragi has unique words in which is not found in Dari, Farsi, Pashto, or any other language. Hazaragi has its own grammars. Hazaragi has vowels, consonants, and parts of speech. Hazaragi is spoken by 10 million people worldwide, globally, in 5 continents. Hazaragi has been discriminated against, so therefore it has been discriminated for far too long. It's time for it to grow and flourish and become a full-fledged language. Some people may argue against it, so Hazaragi is not rich in terms of vocabulary and literature. That's okay. Currently, Hazaragi has like 25 to 30,000 words, which is good enough, because the expert says if there is 3,000 words, a person can use a language as functional language. Hazaragi needs proper investigation in order to fix alphabet and grammar structure, etc. Hazaragi also needs rule of language. Hazaragi may miss with Persian literature, but it's fine. We can live with that. Hazaragi may not be invited into major poetry events. That's okay. We can create our own. Further suggestions: Hazaragi language is comprehensive, such as Besudi, Daizengi, Jagori, Yakaulangi, and it requires further research. Alphabet, sounds, and grammatical structure needs research. Develop further for sake of being comprehensive language. Resource development, collection of folklores, parables, and mythology in the language, encountering the opposition's dominations. Okay, so there are 7 objections which I'd like to address. Those objections that many people raised, saying that because the Hazaragi doesn't have alphabet, so therefore it can't be a language. I'd like to go one by one. So number 1 was Hazaragi doesn't have an alphabet. You can see here there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Currently there are 7 alphabets which has been put forth. Some of them are like 20 years old and 30 years old. So some of them are recently very new by Kabla Hazaragi Academy. Some of them have been by Linguistic in UK. They have put forward this alphabet, and with this alphabet book for children. This one is fairly new. So there are 7 alphabets which we can choose and pick from. There is also Hazaragi letters and numbers here as well, which we can use. There are no books written in Hazaragi language. So currently, as I've compiled, there is 9 books which are written by several authors. All of these books, which is published in past 10 to 20 years, they are in Hazaragi language. It has been published and has been reviewed, published in Hazaragi language. There are these Hazaragi storybooks, this is the collection of Hazaragi storybooks, and there are several other books. There's 8 books that they are available online as well, like Library of Congress. They have these books as well. And this book is the Luke Bible of Luke in Hazaragi language, which is called Khush Khabri. So this is also translated in Hazaragi language. These are magazines. There's Sabit, which is registered by Hazaragi Academy in Quetta, Pakistan, and for past several years that they have been publishing these magazines in Hazaragi language, which is collection of stories, articles, many more things. There are several Hazaragi proverbs, which you can see there at the back, this guy, which is around 2,000 to 2,500 proverb, which is translated in 4 languages, in English, in Urdu, in Persian, and as well, of course, because the proverbs are in Hazaragi language. They call it Farhangi Adabiyati Hazaragi. There is also this book, that book, and this book. These all are collections of Hazaragi proverbs. So altogether it comes around 5,000 proverbs. Some says Hazaragi doesn't have a dictionary or lexicons. So here I got a collection of lexicon which I would like to show you. Currently there are 10 dictionaries that they are in Hazaragi language. For example, this dictionary, which is by Professor Shali Akbar Sharistani, there is currently 12,000 words with its meanings in Hazaragi language. There is also this Farangi Ibtidai Milli Hazara, which is also translated in Farsi and also in English by Tariq Malistani. It's also currently a few thousand words. Farhangi Mardumi Hazara Oghul, and this one's, which is translated in 48 accents, 48 dialects, and in 7 languages by Dr. Zebul Nisa. Lejay Murawaj Hazaragi in Daizingi, Besud Jagori by Muhammad Ewaz Nabizadeh Karigar. So this is also in Qamus Leja in Hazaragi, a dictionary of Sultani. This all are around maybe 20,000 to 30,000 words currently being compiled as a lexicon or dictionary. Number 4, Hazaragi doesn't have a grammatical structure. I'd like to tell you that this Omniglot, this is one of the well-known organization, international organization, that they have past many years they have worked on Hazaragi alphabets, Hazaragi vowels, Hazaragi consonants, and Hazaragi verb system of Hazaragi. So in a sense, and Romanic alphabet of Hazaragi as well as Arabic alphabet of Hazaragi. So therefore, this is a basic structure that we can work with, but however, we can further advance this and we can move it further. Hazaragi doesn't have radio or other media. So here are some of the examples that I've collected from World Wide Web. Currently shows that like there are 6-7 channels and radio channels that currently existed as we speak. Some of the movies, so there are currently 4 movies which came out a few years ago, and Bush Chini came out some 10 years ago, Hazaragi animation movie for children. These are 2 recent movies that they have been released in Australia in Hazaragi language. Number 7, well, Hazaragi is not ancient, so I'd like to here explain how ancient is Hazaragi. In the Persian Empire times, so during the Persian era and Persian area, on places like Afghanistan, modern day Iran, Persia, so modern Persian Empire. I'd like to explain era, for example, during time of 650 to 1219 AD. There was Islamic era, which was the expansion of Arabs. So Hazaras, as many of the experts believe that the Hazara native people of the area, and they have existed in modern day Hazaristan. From 1037 to 1220, Turkic era, where there was rule of Turkic people in Afghanistan, Persia, and those regions, and Hazaras still existed there, and Hazaras first mentioned around 1200 AD. Then comes during the era of Safavid, which is Persian, and then comes era of Mongolic era, where Genghis Khan conquered many of the regions from 1290 AD, and their reigns existed until 1500. So Mongolic people, and Hazaras are believed to be descendant of Turco and Mongol. So they are around between 1000 and 1200 AD. The Hazara and Mongolic language has been formed. And thereafter, all the Persian Empire and Western Empire, but Hazaras still spoken their language as a Hazaragi language. So in a sense, there is like 700 years old language. When we talk about ancient, how more ancient do you want? Research on Hazaragi so far. So there are several books, several research thesis that was currently happening on Hazaragi. So this one, the dialect of Hazara Persian, which is Dueling, which he did not have much information, and his is one of the initial work. He is also under impression that Hazaragi is the variant of or dialect of Persian, which is incorrect. So there are this work, Lineations in Hazaragi, which is MPhil thesis on Hazaragi done by Hazaras. Sketches of Hazara phonology, which is by Roman and also Mr. Sharistani. Linguistic ecology of Hazaragi language, which is also done by Anis Gul, Anis Gulay Ehsani, which is also another Hazara person. Wajay Turki wa Zaban Hazaragi, which is also Turkish Hazaragi. List has been compiled here. And Kashafat Zabani Dari and Hazaragi as well, Zabani Hazaragi. This is interesting one. This research has been done for master degree, which is attitude towards Hazaragi. A guy from Kabul who went to USA and done the research and master thesis, he has seen and mentioned that the discrimination against Hazaragi language and many people who they are rebelling against the language. Tabar and Zabani Hazara, so talking about Hazaragi language. There are several authorities currently worldwide available. So this is ethno-linguistic, which is worldwide, and it's also listed Hazaragi as international standard organization. Hazaragi code there and Hazaragi language is there mentioned. NATI, National Accreditation Authority for Translating and Interpreting in Australia. SILA as renowned organization internationally. They have some work on Hazaragi. Omniglot, which I mentioned earlier, they have also international organization that they have done some preliminary work on Hazaras. And there are several other like translating and interpreting services have on Hazaragi language. Some other state-based organizations, they also have mentioned Hazaragi language. Hazaras have several poets, modern and old poets. So Amir Khosrawi Hazara, which was they went during time of the Mughal Empire to India from Afghanistan, which was from Lachin Hazaras. So there is recently a book written on him and his language and his poem as well. It was quite renowned as the poet who speaks like speaking very fluently on language, and also his poems quite renowned. There are several other poets as well, so they're quite renowned and experienced on Hazaragi poems. Current many singers, so Abe Mirza, one of the pioneers of Lady Hazara singer, folk Hazaragi singer. Sarwar Sarkhosh, Ustad Tawkali, that the past 50 years he has been singing in Hazaragi folk songs and has been awarded the highest award in Afghanistan for his Hazaragi language and music, which unites the whole Afghanistan. Dawood Sarkhosh, one of my legends, and there are several other renowned singers in Hazaragi. Currently, there is also in Hazaragi has comprehensive list on astrology, comprehensive list on human's anatomy, and also in herbology. Hazaragi have hundreds of vocabularies on these three spheres. Hazaragi is spoken in 5 continents so far. And one final point that Hazaragi is a separate language. However, further research is needed to advance Hazaragi as a language. There are some of the references which I've used. So the number one, Attitude Towards Hazaragi by Abedin Jamal. Sketches of Hazara Phonology by Roman and Sharistani. The Dialogues of Hazara Persian by G.K. Dewling. Lineation in Hazaragi, MPhil thesis by Saira Banu. The Hazaras by Hassan Paulari, which published in 1989. Goish Hazaragi by Dr. Hafiz Sahar Shireti. Qamus Leja by Professor Shah Ali Akbar Sharistani. Hazara Dictionary book by Roman Graham. Introduction to Hazaragi Identity by Maulana Barmak Balkhi. Linguistic Ecology of Hazaragi Language, MA thesis by Anis Gulay Ehsani. My name is John Gulzari, and any feedback, I'll welcome any feedback on John Gulzari, one word, JOHNGULZARI @gmail.com. I further thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I hope this presentation was useful for you on understanding Hazaragi as a language. Thank you and goodbye.